appreciate you, and thank you so much.
This one?
I'm
Yeah.
gonna erase this. Alright, so, if I can get y'all's attention, please, that means this side of the room, please.
Oh, sorry.
What do you see? Like, what's the first thing you think when you see this sign?
Segregation.
Yeah, segregation.
Whites against Mexicans.
Whites against Mexicans, okay. Anyone else? Being racist, okay. Good. You know what? Those were great answers. Why do you think this sign was put up during this time?
Mexicans don't go into that establishment.
Okay, yeah. Anyone else? All right. Okay, so what we're going to learn about today are the effects of the Great Depression. Okay, so you learned about the causes yesterday, now we're going to learn about some of the effects of the Great Depression. So what does the sign on this man's back say? Actually, he might be front facing, but still. Can you read it? Here, I can turn off some lights.
I know 3 trains and
Let's go.
speak 3 languages, fought for 3 years, have 3 children, and no work for 3 months, but I only want 1 job.
All right, so clearly he's a highly qualified person. You know, he knows 3 languages, 3 trades, which could be stuff like welding, and you know, he has 3 children, so he has a family support, and all he wants is one job. Well, that is something that happened during the Great Depression. A lot of people lost their jobs. So let's talk about some effects of the Great Depression. So, like I said yesterday, the U.S. GDP dropped from $105 billion to $55 billion in 4 years. 9,000 banks failed, which was half of the banks in America. And the average household income went down 40%. So, I was talking to Joanna and Jesse before class about how much the average teacher starts out with no experience, and it's $28,000 a year. Imagine if that salary was cut down 40%.
You would barely have any money.
We wouldn't be making any money, okay? 0 money. By 1932, farmers were making 1/3 of what they had been in 1929. 400,000 farms were lost through foreclosure from 1929 to 1932. Prices fell 10% per year, which meant that the demand for products was decreasing, which led widespread unemployment, and a lowering of wages. And suicides increased. So, like I said yesterday, the Great Depression was not only an economic downturn for America, but it caused a lot of people to actually become very depressed and not enjoy their lives anymore because it was such a very bad thing. Suicides increased from 14 out of every 100,000 people to 17 out of 100,000 people. And that may not seem like a large number, but every self-death, is a big number. Refusing to provide relief with the belief that the economy would fix itself, President Hoover created shanty towns for people who lost their homes. These shanty towns were poorly constructed and commonly referred to as Hoovervilles. Okay, this is a Hooverville. Would you want to live here?
No.
Look at that. Most of these houses are built with scrap wood and tin, and think about it. A lot of these people lost their homes, their well-constructed homes, and were forced to move into these lackluster communities right outside of cities because they couldn't afford to live in their homes anymore. I have some printed versions of these notes. Would anyone like some? You don't have to take them. It's just if you really want them. That's nice. Oh, look at that. I'm sorry. You want one or you want one? Awesome. Glad y'all wanted it. Okay. So let's move on. Alright, so unemployment. Why can't you give my dad a job? These were typical things that people were doing during this time. How's it going, man? Here you go. So these were typical things that people were doing back then, you know, picketing to get jobs. And, you know, they were using their children as like an example. It's like, how am I supposed to provide for my child? So from 1929 to 1933, unemployment went from 3% to 25%. This meant unemployment went from 1.55 million people in 1929 to 12,830,000 in 1933. So imagine that in the population of Burkburnett, there was only, let's say, 2,000 unemployed people. And then it skyrocketed to 1/4 of the complete, what is the population of Burkburnett? Does anyone know? A little over 10,000? So, okay, so let's drop the number down to like 500 people and then explode it up to 2,500 people. You know, that would be a lot of people losing their jobs and a lot of families being, a lot of families losing income and becoming poverty-ridden. And these lack of jobs led to people demanding immigrants be deported to create more jobs for white Americans, which explains that sign at the beginning. So, deportation and repatriation. Can someone look at this picture and tell me what the picture says and like, read it out?
You look like Mexicans, but we were born here for Americans.
And it says, good luck on the project. And it says, Mexico, United States war. So this was a political cartoon during the time. And, my bad. Deportation is the action of deporting a foreigner from a country. And repatriation is the return of someone to their own country. So what's the difference? When I read this definition to you, what is the like clear difference between the two?
Deportation is like being thrown out.
Yeah?
They sound pretty much the same.
Reportation is like, so if they, even if they have a green card, they still gotta go back.
Okay, so that's good too, but the true difference is that repatriation is convincing someone who is from Mexico or from a foreign country to go back to the country. Not forcing them, but to convincing them. So, okay. Deportation during the 1930s was forcing American immigrants to go back to Mexico. Repatriation was convincing or coercing Mexican immigrants to go back to Mexico. The government used job records, okay, from businesses to find these people, arrest them, and deport them based on their last name. Okay, so a lot of people with just Mexican sounding last names that were born in America were being deported just off the basis that, hey, you look Mexican, your last name's Mexican, we need more jobs for white Americans, you're gone. Now, does that sound right to y'all? No, it doesn't. Okay, and so many of the people who were deported were American citizens, and during the 1930s, the U.S. government began repatriating Mexican immigrants. They often offered free train rides back to Mexico. Most actually went voluntarily, knowing that they could get more aid in Mexico at this time than America. Others were coerced into going back. So 82,409 Mexican immigrants voluntarily went back to Mexico out of 400,000 in total. Most of those 400,000 were American-born citizens. All right, so global trade. We talked about global trade yesterday and how it diminished and how it affected the economy. The total value of world trade had fallen by nearly half once countries began imposing tariffs. The United States started this downfall in trade by implementing the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act of 1930. And world trade is essential to an economy. Without it, an economy will never function the right way. Okay, that was the last slide, so we're good. You can go back. I appreciate it, sir. All right, so who were my people that had Kahoot on their phones? All right. Okay, raise your hands high, please. So we got 1, 2, 3. Who wants to be a leader of a group?
Of what?
All right, 1. We need, let's see. How many people? We got 2, 4, 7, 10, 12, 14. We got 14 people. Let's say we just need 4 people to be in groups. So that's 1, 2, Come on now.
What is it for?
3, it's a Kahoot quiz. We're gonna take a Kahoot quiz in groups. So 1, 2, 3, one more, just one more. On this side of the room, please. Anybody. Doesn't have to be her. Stop looking at her. Anybody, okay, so it's her. Alright, so if you can just get your phones out and get your Kahoot ready. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Do we have to start from?
Just trying to check. I mean, you don't have to. If you want to use another device to access, to get on the Kahoot with my game pin, you can do that too.
Who's our group?
We'll get groups in a second. I'm just gonna get this Kahoot pulled up.
Wait, Joanne, are you your own group?
Yeah.
I'll pick you up. So I got some names, I ask the questions.
She's been great to smart person.
We're gonna go into team mode. Alright. So we're gonna go based off proximity, so it's gonna be you leading group, right?
Yeah.
So she's in your group, he's in your group, he's in your group. She's leading the group, right? Yep. 1, 2, so these 3, and Jesse, you get to their group. And you said you were leading the group, right? So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Is that fair? Alright, so please, yes, just one phone. So please get in to your groups, like bunch your desks up together, and let me see who the groups are. Now, well, Kahoot won't allow any inappropriate team names, so when you sign up with the PIN, which is on the board, you can create your own team names and you'll put who's on your team. So if we can just get that going.
We're team one.
Okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. Just,
We are.
good, we got one team on there.
Why is there 3 new characters?
It's just for the people in your group, it doesn't really matter, you can just put them in and, I mean, you only have 3 people in your group, so. Now, hey, we only need one device per group. And y'all working in a group to compete. It's Friday, man, Friday. It's Thursday. It's Thursday. I said no. He's asking where's the candy at, and I'm saying Friday. It's only Thursday. We all on yet?
Yeah, we're winners.
Winners? Okay. Alright, good. So we got every group on there yet? Is your group on there? Is your group on there? Not yet?
Wow, it's so far it's like 4 letters.
Alright. So all four groups are on there?
No.
One. Alright. So we're gonna start. Full street.
In the staff.
Oh, I know this. It's not working.
Alright, good. Very good. Alright. Remember,
Hey, what the heck?
remember that there is a speed bonus for whoever answers first, so remember that. Alright.
Yeah, why is this hard going?
No, because it gives you time to talk over it. There's a counter, it says 3, 2, 1. And then it starts.
Yeah.
That's dumb.
I appreciate that.
everybody ready for the next question? All right.
Hey, the winners are winning.
Did it go out like you again?
Yeah, I think that's what he used. I tried.
Yeah, let's try to hit this other screen and check that deal.
We're
Try
in
it.
third.
All right. So winners are doing pretty good.
I just want to put that absent deal in there. We're with you out here today.
There you go, good.
We are being
Dude, we
joked.
are getting like a party.
Joe right now.
So the reason I put nothing, absolutely nothing, and almost nothing is because a lot of historians feel like he did nothing during the Great Depression to really help people. Those challenging times really weren't helping people, right? So when I showed them to you, all right, let's keep going. Winners are winning, close second.
Winner.
Basic math in this question. Yeah. There you go. Hey, why is it 22%?
Because you subtract 25 from 3.
Exactly. All right, let's keep going. So Jack is in the lead. Two answers. Come on, Bruce. Everybody should get this one right. There we go. 400,000.
Third place.
All right.
So that's the last one, yeah.
Nobody wants their scoop. Sorry if you can't see because
Get it.
Hey, we were first.
there you go. Good. Glad you're working.
Oh, yeah.
7 out of 10. We're almost done.
Oh. I don't matter.
Now two answers. Basic math. Alright.
I did math. I did.
Alright.
It was a little slow, but
Are you ready? Okay.
From number is 32.
How's that? Oh, it's okay. It's alright. Alright, Jack's still leading. Jack's coming up.
Who's above the winners?
Falling the prices mean that.
Alright, shut up, we might get this wrong.
Huh? Look at that. How many did you guys do?
Does that say second?
Good.
Oh,
Good.
oh, okay.
But yeah, when prices start falling, demand for products are going down, which is what leads to a recession.
We covered for y'all.
All right, scoreboard, getting close. 10 out of 10, last question.
Oh, we just went over this.
I'm glad you know that. We just went over this. Oh, there's an answer.
Get it.
Good job, everybody got that right. All right, so Jack won. Good job. You all did great.
This is my iPad.
Look, that team fell apart.
No, we're in the lead, and y'all played completely.
Yeah, Friday, though, this is a new day. It don't matter, we still won on Sunday.
It's Tuesday.
No.
Very happy.
It's Thursday, not Friday.
Friday, it is a new day. We still have to dub on Tuesday.
They said the best class. Oh, wait.
All right. Okay. Turn back. On.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
How does it feel to lose?
I mean, you should know because the football team is so great.
But, hey, I ain't sure
boundaries of nature.
Technically.
Yeah, education's way
So-
Can you shut it off?
Alright, so let's realign our desks, let's get back into our roles.
No, it's all.
Come on, let's focus, let's get back into our roles. Okay. So we talked about those shanty towns. That President Hoover created. They're called Hoovervilles for the people that weren't here because you got old. So why do you think President Hoover created those shanty towns?
Didn't know what else to do.
Good point. Didn't know what else to do. Anybody else? I'd love to hear y'all's input on this.
Wait.
Why did he make those Hoovervilles, those shanty towns, those really bad?
So people with no
communities.
money can actually have some.
See if they can make
We're
it.
in fine
Go ahead.
answering this
So
one too.
guilty about like the whole economy.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so the reason he made these was his administration was feeling the pressure from the United States and as a community that he wasn't doing anything because it was his belief that the economy would fix itself and as it ran its due course over time. But because remember what we talked about yesterday with the Fed and the methods it was using were flawed. Remember that?
Mhm.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Okay, well the Fed's methods were flawed, and that's why President Hoover not doing anything was never going to help during the Great Depression, which is why he did not get reelected in 1932, and FDR became president for the next 16 years. Okay, and okay, so we talked about deportation and repatriation. Okay, so who else is putting an emphasis on deporting immigrants that you know of? Who said you? You? Say it louder. Donald Trump. Okay. What's his deal with deporting
He
immigrants?
wants to build a wall.
He wants to build a wall, but why does he want to deport immigrants?
Is it safer, maybe?
Okay.
To make America great again.
To make America great again. And how do you make America great again? You give Americans their jobs back. That's one of the things he's pushing is, we're going to become a self-made America again. Americans are going to get their jobs back. We're going to rely on America instead of other people from now on. So good, I'm glad y'all knew that. So now we're gonna have an open class discussion, a whole class discussion, about what is deportation and repatriation, what is the difference between the two, how the United States government went about deporting people during the Great Depression, and okay, we'll go over. I'll tell you the last part at the end. So they just start discussing with each other, like deportation, repatriation.
With the groups you're just in.
No, just a whole class discussion.
Oh.
It sounds pretty much the same to me. Like,
What's
it's just
the
one
other
sound.
word?
Reparation.
Okay, since y'all were here, deportation, you know what deportation is, right? Deporting, Mexican, this is the forceful deportation of Mexican immigrants or immigrants in general. Repatriation is convincing or coercing immigrants to go back to their country. Not forcing them, but convincing them or tricking them into going back into their country. So if y'all can just start discussing that, like anything y'all want to know more about or just things like comments on deportation, repatriation. This is really important.
I mean, to me, at first, they sound pretty much the same, except one is more like, they sugarcoated a little bit.
Yeah,
Because they
yeah.
both achieved the same goal.
Yeah, you're getting these immigrants to leave your country, but yeah, the true difference is like they're saying like, oh, they want to go back, but if you're tricking them to go back, you know, it's not. So if we can just start discussing this as a whole class, this is one of my big things here. So I need y'all to put your input on this. You said you wanted to either work with immigrants one day. Like, how do you feel about deportation and repatriation?
I don't know.
Come on, it's not that big of a deal. It's just class. We're whole class discussion over this topic.
No, because like, I don't know, the only thing I wanted to do when I grew up is just like help them like fix like their actual papers though, so they're like not here legally. That's
Okay.
something I just wanted to help them with.
Okay. Come on.
How do you do that though? Like, did you fix their, fix their papers, is what she said?
Yeah, it's like, you can't like.
Sometimes their papers don't get filled out appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they come in with coyotes or something like that. Isn't that what it is?
I don't know about that, but, come on, let's get into this discussion.
They're called
It's like,
coyotes,
they're
it's the
called
people that get them out.
Yeah.
My house.
That's what they're called.
Let's get off the coyotes, please, we need to get into this discussion. So let me just introduce you to the other thing I was saying. If the government tried to do these things today, deport and repatriate people the way they did back then, which was checking your job records, and then coming to your home and arresting you, and then sending you back, or convincing you by saying, hey, we have a free train ride right here back to your home country, what would happen?
We'd probably blow it.
Probably get blown. Why would we get blown up?
Why would it get blown up?
What? Why? Come on.
Well, think about it. People aren't gonna like it, and they're gonna tell, like, right to their own country, and the country's gonna start a war.
Okay, so you think a war might be started?
Maybe.
But I think
Essentially.
it'd be more along the lines of like a civil war.
A civil war?
If it races those levels.
Because think about America today. How diverse is America today?
Very diverse.
Very-
You can't, okay, other than
Unless
Owl
something
Park,
big
other than Owl Park and local
Okay, that's
communities,
only Wichita County.
and other than Owl Park and local communities throughout every state, you're not gonna find a town that just has all white people anymore. You really aren't.
Bowie,
Okay, even Bowie. Even Bowie, 'cause I've been to Bowie.
Black brothers.
But you're not gonna find any community in America that just has white people only. You're gonna find a mixed community. So think about how the citizens in the United States would react if they started checking your job records and your last name was Alvarez and they said, hey, we're here to arrest you. It's like, my dad came to America, I was born in America, so I'm a naturalized American citizen. So how would that make them feel? Go ahead.
So now when we're talking about this, are we talking Mexicans or are we talking?
deportation.
It's
Well,
deportation.
are we talking like the other, like Middle Eastern?
Yeah, everybody. When you're thinking of today, you can think of anybody.
I mean, see, I'd be fine with
With what?
with deportation. It
For
doesn't-
who?
For anybody that's illegal,
Why?
because I mean,
There are people who
They're-
weren't illegal being
like, no, like, not trying to.
No judgment, no judgment. Calm down, calm down.
It's so, I mean, they're taking a lot of our jobs, so.
Okay, keep going.
I mean.
And they're not paying
and I guess
taxes.
also me being.
But that's not
like,
true.
I don't bother, because it doesn't bother me, because I mean, I know that for a fact my family's white, so.
Okay, let's stop that. Don't record this,
Your
please.
family's white?
Please put your phone away.
I did not know.
Okay,
that.
well, okay, you said they don't pay taxes,
Who?
right? Okay, that's not true. That's not true. 95% of,
if they have a job, they pay
95
taxes and they take it out of the check.
95% of illegal immigrants pay taxes. Because the jobs that they have, not all the jobs they have are under the table. And they do pay their taxes. People who say they don't pay their taxes,
That just make them
You know,
get noticed even more.
it's just assumed, it's assumed because, oh, they're illegal, so there's no way they're paying taxes. But they are, they're paying their
Why do
taxes.
you think your parents get income tax, like, at the beginning of the new year? Like, why do you think that they get all that money
Yeah,
back that
'cause,
they
like,
got taken out of
Because
their
my
check?
parents
paying-
were born in America and they birthed me and.
Okay, but think about it, think about the starts of America, think about the starts of America. Are we really Americans? Or are our ancestors really Americans?
No.
Exactly. We're Europeans, Native Americans, nobody who came to America actually nobody who came to America is really Americans. You know, the East Asiatic people that migrated to America, to the continent that we now know as of America, went over the Bering Strait icebergs. There used to be a giant ice bridge, a landmass called Beringia. They went over it and came all the way through Alaska and settled into America. So really, they were Asian. And over time, as they settled into America, they changed, they evolved. So really, there's no such thing as a classic American. So like Native Americans truly are the original Americans because they came here first. But like we're not, our ancestors were not really Americans. They were Europeans they're Europeans, and,
Scandinavians.
you know, just Europeans, Asians, Polynesian, you know, from the islands. So really, as we've evolved throughout time, we've become Americans, but like, our
We're
starts
not
aren't
really
American.
Americans.
You know,
we're
Africa,
we're
you know,
mixes.
people, you know, Africa, they settled here. Like, that's just how it works, you know what I'm saying? So, okay, and one more question. What if President Trump tried to deport people in your family? How would you feel? Just because he found a little bit of immigrant in your family?
Well, I mean, then, we
that's
start over that.
Then a lot of people are gonna get deported.
A lot of people are gonna be upset.
You know, let's say, okay, let's say his basis is, if you're not white and you have some kind of Hispanic, Islamic Muslim, you know,
Heritage.
heritage,
So
like
they
you're
just
going
don't
back.
like-
That's not right. Keep it, go ahead.
What if we don't like that family member?
Let's see, that's not the point. That's not the point, because if they were born here, they have the right to be here.
See,
You all were born here, right?
yeah.
So you all have the naturalized right to be in America,
All right, Chloe.
okay? Okay, my great-grandfather, on my dad's side, he's not from here. I don't know him, but him and my great-grandmother came to America from Mexico. But-
Same.
And they had already birthed my grandparents in Mexico. So my grandparents were immigrants. But my dad and his brothers are naturalized citizens because they were born here. So does that make me an immigrant?
No.
Exactly, because I was born here. So what made these people in the 1930s that were born here but had Hispanic last names immigrants?
Because they didn't like them.
They have the heritage.
Just because they did it out of,
They didn't want to.
Go ahead, build on that.
I'm trying, they did it because they just, basically just because they felt like doing it, they felt like that they were not needed in this area, like if you're not a part of the white ethnicity, then you don't need to be a part of it.
They're not. They weren't immigrants, they were naturalized American citizens, and they're being deported to open up jobs because that was the way that President Hoover also felt he could impact America. Go ahead.
Maybe because people felt the need to deport all those people was because the immigrants, I guess, might be seen as coming illegally or just in general, like, in
Yeah.
that kind of like, so like technically, any children that they have would be seen as illegal children because.
But if they're born here, they have the naturalized right to be here because they were born in America.
Yeah, but that's how people would see it. As
Yeah, exactly. So like, but is it fair? Can I get a class-wide answer on this? Is this fair?
I think so.
You haven't said much. Is it fair?
To a white last name.
You can say if it's fair or not. It's your opinion. It's that, you know what? No judgment.
Hey, see, I feel like you're on my side, so go ahead and say it.
Yeah, I'm kind of a Christian.
Oh.
What's wrong? Okay, well, but what's okay? Okay, so
But I mean,
So,
my
you
dad
know,
was raised-
most Hispanics are Roman Catholic, so they're Christians. Because Roman Catholicism is a basis for Christianity, for the modern day Christianity that y'all have right now. So why do they deserve to get deported for not being Christian even though they are Christian?
Okay.
Now that you have that, how does that make you feel? Does it change your opinion a little bit?
Christians got it.
I'm asking him.
CJ?
Come on, I'm asking him. Come on.
Stephen.
You don't have to be uncomfortable. We're good.
Steven, just be straight like I was.
I understand people's opinions.
I don't like immigrants.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
So what happens if like change last name to white last name? Would that like?
They'll still be able to find through records that
Like job
you
records.
changed your name,
So
and they were going to deport you or repatriate you either way.
But how hard is it?
What if you change your name before you get a job?
But how hard is it?
If you
to
change
change
your
That's true.
Change
But
your
I mean, then you have
last
public
name.
records.
What
And
happens
search public records.
Change your last name in Mexico.
what happens if you delete like
They can still access public records.
But you came from
They can demand public records. But what were you going to say?
But how hard is it just to go through the process and get it to become?
Back then?
Just now, then, overall?
Well, back then that process wasn't very good. It's not like it is today. It was a lot different. And it was easier to get into America.
So are we talking about back then, or are we talking about right now?
Well, you know,
That's kind of lost.
our class discussion was supposed to start back then and finish back now, but it's kind of been varied because a lot of people aren't saying anything, you know, but that's okay.
You're in.
Alright, alright.
I'm talking about.
So that was a good whole class discussion. I appreciate y'all's points of views, and I understand how you feel. So now we're gonna get back into our groups, and y'all are gonna do some scenarios. You're gonna write out some answers to these scenarios as a group, and we're gonna read what our answers to these scenarios are. So if we can just get back in our groups, please. Let's go. Who won the food quiz?
We did.
Alright, so,
We did.
there's five scenarios.
Scenario.
Which one do you want?
Give me a scenario, I'll.
This one is a Mexican American assistant in 2017, and this one is a Hispanic mother of 5. So I'll let y'all say who came in second? Y'all? So y'all have second.
They still get the dirty ones. Because it's a Hispanic class. So that means that along the line somewhere you had Hispanic.
So what if everybody along with their kind of sport, some type of nice thing?
What kind of scenario?
So there's like, in the verses I have, right, so in every little thing, wouldn't we all eventually, slowly but surely, want to be like, some type of one you find?
Like,
Yeah. So like, wouldn't
I
everybody
like
get deported?
right?
So we'd all just like move out of the country, only the president
Does
would
it
be
sound like
here.
you have it?
Well, I have these two.
Look at all this going
So like,
on.
Y'all did good, but
build our
first
own
choice, they won.
big
And
country.
that's what, makes sense.
Wait, did you get it? Did you get one of those sheets? Or
Yeah,
is-
we all will get scenarios.
Oh, they're just still choosing.
They're choosing first, second, who got third?
He did.
Okay, so y'all get third, and then that was the last choice.
Look
We're
at
in
this.
down-
one?
no, we're down
That's
to two.
okay.
Okay, down to 2. So here, y'all pick between these 3 so far. What's up?
I'm just trying to get that picture.
You can pick one.
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, look, last name's Williams, we're doing this one.
Yeah.
Alright, I'm glad y'all came to the decision. Y'all, go ahead. Y'all can look at these, sorry man, y'all can look at these 2, and once they get the one they want, I'll show you the other.
You're an American citizen with Mexican lineage in the 1950s. You look more Hispanic.
I can't
Wait,
spell
why
what
are you
it
getting
is,
those?
No, it's the third one. It's your third, it's one of your 3 options.
And Cody Walker.
You gave it up.
Ah, alright.
You're a man, you're a white man with a girlfriend.
First letter of my last name is a W.
American Diner refuses to serve because.
Y'all can write all those
My last name
papers.
is G, so that means
A sheet like this, like just fill a sheet.
You were an American citizen with Mexican lineage.
Simple.
You look more
What's the first letter of
Hispanic.
his last
You look
name?
more Hispanic than Caucasian, and your last name is Alvarez. You're about to pull Mexican last
Hey,
name.
let's start working on the answer. I was
It's
said.
there. What do you want to do? You
her last
choose
name, her first one's
yourself,
an
find a way to prove your status as
I
an
don't know if it's
Alright, last scenario.
That's.
You're a Mexican American citizen. President Trump has imposed mass deportations throughout the United States. And American citizens. Trump's rally cries.
Y'all go first, it's okay. It's okay.
You have to pick.
Don't worry, I like the girlfriend.
Oh,
Let's do all.
Hispanic girlfriend of Trump.
Oh, so you are.
That's wrong.
Oh, you are his. Alright, I'm sorry. Alright, okay, between these 2.
Probably go get this, I feel like
I ain't even gonna have the choice, cause I like your, so we're conversation and I'm not.
Alright, so what do you write on this paper? You write on this paper?
Right on the paper. That's perfectly fine.
And we're writing, like we're answering.
Just answer the scenario, like what would
Take care.
what it says at the end, please, like how would you handle this? So how's it going until the answer?
Alright. You're a Mexican
Y'all
American
can
citizen
write-
in
y'all can write-
2017.
Y'all
President
supposed to
Trump
write
has
sure if you figure your opinions together and figure out what you're
An
doing.
American citizen since you were born. Rallying cry as Americans.
You own a business, and you
Y'all
had
start.
Mexicans working on business.
Well, what I do.
Most of the majority of
Just
them.
talk about it,
How
talk
would you,
about
how
it.
would you,
Been
like,
it,
how would you handle
what-
this?
What would y'all do?
What would you
Stand
consider?
up.
First of all, how would you like to do it?
Well, if we're basing it off of the, well, no, if we're basing it off of like, he probably get.
That's kind of my go-to for this stuff. Because Canada's like, Canada's one of those places that it's like, they're not this way.
Well, they would go through,
They're,
this is why we
you
do.
want to pick one? Alright, now please, you can write on that sheet, please, just fill the sheet up with your answer, and then we'll get to reading your scenarios and your answers.
So,
Please, y'all do great. But,
Would you leave your?
that's kind of like my go-to for a lot of things. Like I said, I'll go and pick weekend, but you know, we can't. Oh, come on,
Cause if you move somewhere else, it pretty much just
Yeah,
forcing the
a
idea.
father, he may have came here before, his 5 kids were born here, just like y'all. So they have natural
And it's
rights
not
to
like
be
you
here,
practice
you
against
know what I'm saying? So how would you feel if like, your dad just told, like, was gonna tell you like, yeah, you know,
Or arrested.
we're German. So now
If you get arrested.
it's Germany, we have, hey, it's okay, we're German, so now we gotta go back to Germany because, my great grandfather was from there, so now they're saying that we need to go back there. Is that fair? No, it's not. So just think that. Think like it's not fair. So just think what
Would
you
you, okay, here's the thing.
You know, you could flee the
Would
country.
you
You
get,
could
how could you get like
move.
other white
You
people?
can move from state to state to avoid it.
I guess, to show
There's a lot of things you
this
can
is
do.
wrong.
You know what I'm saying?
We want to
You just
say-
gotta, just kind of be creative. Don't get outlandish
Cause you have to get a certain.
about your answers. You're not moving to Mars or the moon. You know?
so you said you would have to,
Okay, so.
so anybody who has a lot of points,
Do we have a different one?
There's this is the only one that the other group didn't pick.
There you go.
Okay.
Oh,
Really didn't like this one.
We're finding it difficult to answer. Cause
Okay.
they kept saying prejudice.
I'm gonna,
My kids
And
I'll be, we're all Mexicans, so.
because it's not fair.
you were an American?
Whoa.
Alright,
Oh, it's the bird.
alright. You were an American citizen?
The birds, you know how like everything's off and so.
Yeah, he wants to reenact.
Okay, you know, that's too outlandish. Come on, let's be serious about this. It's too outlandish.
You're an American citizen with Mexican lineage in the 1930s. You look more Hispanic than Caucasian in your last name or heritage. You hear about people with Mexican last names being arrested before arrested, even though they are American citizens. What do you do? Would you leave yourself or find a way to prove your status as an American
It's a
citizen?
serious question.
I'll staff as we're moving to Mexico, join the army, and make the biggest. Affordably?
Put a C in there and he'll know what you're talking about.
That was.
I mean, it started out good, but then you just kind of.
Is this outlandish? So like, let's say like I moved to, I try to move my stats, it doesn't work out.
You had it right,
Next,
that's the
join the army, like the biggest army started the war with.
That's outlandish.
It's outlandish. Like moving back to Mexico, that's not outlandish. But saying that you're going to become the ultimate general over Mexico and we're going to become the United States, that's never going to happen. You know, you're not Santa Anna or any of those people that control Mexico at that time. Oh, wait, is class over?
Yeah.
Alright, so you can just turn it into me. Sir, thank you. Am I wrong? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you all. And Friday, we'll be going over like New Deal policies. Yeah, New Deal policies and such stuff. Okay? Excuse me, sir. Actually, I got my notes.